They called it the Great War, the war to end all wars, a tragic, inexplicable catastrophe that engulfed a continent. At least, that's the story we've been told. But what if the catastrophe was not an accident? What if the millions of lives lost in the mud of the Somme and the Verdun were not merely pawns in a game of kings and kaisers, but the final, bloody sacrifice on the altar of a dying system? This is not merely a story of nations. This is a story of empire, of capital, and of the machine that devoured a generation to save itself. The powder keg of Europe wasn't just built on ancient rivalries. It was engineered by a new global economic order known as industrial capitalism. By 1914, the great powers of the world, Britain, France, Germany, Russia, had been engaged in a decades-long scramble for colonies, a race to carve up the globe at the expense of life in the global south. This was not for glory, but for resources, rubber, cotton, minerals, and most of all, new markets for their goods and new fields for their investors. The system demanded infinite growth on a finite planet. The result was a world of empires, each a pyramid of exploitation, with the colonies at the bottom and the financiers and industrialists at the top. This is the highest stage of capitalism, imperialism. The monopolies and finance capital that dominated economic life had an insatiable hunger for super profits, leading to the economic partition of the world and inevitably to war over its repartition. So, when Archduke Franz Ferdinand was shot, the gears of this machine began to turn. The system had reached its logical conclusion. The treaties and alliances were not just political doctrines, they were cartel agreements of competing capitalist blocs. The so-called national interest was a myth, a story told to the working classes who would be doing the dying. The socialist thinker Rosa Luxemburg saw it clearly. She posited that capitalism, to survive, must constantly expand into non-capitalist territories, the colonies, the pre-industrialized world. Once that world was fully consumed, the system would turn on itself in a violent crisis. The war, she warned, was the method of capital accumulation by other, more brutal means. And so the call went out, not to defend freedom, but to defend the investments and the empires of the ruling class.